Never since the 9/11 attacks have international relations been in such an inherently unstable state. The post-Second World War international order has become something of the past. Along with emerging new regimes in North Africa, a threatening Middle East, and an inward look in Europe, rising new emerging powers and a more interdependent economic system have had a profound impact on international relations. The world stage is becoming increasingly multipolar. Capability and power gaps between developed and developing countries are continuously narrowing. Of course, the state in its classical definition will remain the dominant unit of the global order, and yet globalization and digital technologies are placing enormous strains on governments. There has been a growing awareness that the real world is vulnerable to security threats from the virtual world. Conflicts are now turning to the virtual landscape, to the virtual land of cyberspace. The manipulation and acquisition of classified information are able to massively weaken the infrastructure, the economy, and even the aim of a country. Terrorism, nuclear proliferation, and conflicts will remain key concerns for the international community. Concurrent with the shifting power capabilities among nation states, the absolute power of various international actors such as NATO is increasing, protagonists are changing, and accordingly, the scope and breadth of transnational issues important for global security are being reshuffled. The spread of nuclear technologies is generating concern about the potential emergence of new states with nuclear capabilities or the acquisition of nuclear materials by terrorist groups. Moreover, the dual use of nuclear technologies highlights the imperfections in global energy governance. In an increasingly interconnected world, current and future risks remain largely beyond the forecasting capabilities of analysts and risk experts. For institutions, preparation goes through continuous investment in human capability to build more resilient security systems.
Mesdames et messieurs, bonjour. Bienvenue à cette séance plénière de MEDays consacrée aux nouvelles menaces et aux nouveaux risques. Depuis le 11 septembre, nous l'avons vu dans le film, est apparue aux yeux du grand public une globalisation de l'insécurité et des menaces, une insécurité multiforme qui appelle les différents acteurs mondiaux à repenser la mutualisation des risques. Alors le cadre étatique, fut-il celui de grandes puissances, a montré ses limites. Et il faut réinventer sans cesse des processus de coopération. À ce titre, MEDays a réuni un panel à la fois hétéroclite et à l'image de la planète et de ses problématiques. Je vais vous présenter nos intervenants. Andrés Pastrana Arango, vous êtes ancien président de la République de Colombie. Vous avez dû faire face notamment à la guérilla des FARC et à l'explosion du trafic de cocaïne qui gangrène bien des économies. Vous nous livrerez votre expérience et votre éclairage sur ces problématiques qui illustrent bien la nécessité de faire évoluer les cadres de sécurité internationale. Sven Alkalaj, vous êtes l'actuel ministre des Affaires étrangères de Bosnie-Herzégovine, un jeune pays dans une zone balkanique qui a vécu la guerre et qui doit aussi faire face à des mafias transnationales. Vous nous direz comment, à l'échelon étatique, vous ressentez la nécessité de coopération renforcée pour lutter contre ces nouvelles menaces. Dr Lee, vous êtes le président de China World Peace Foundation et vous interviendrez sur un volet qui vous semble fondamental, ou comment, à vos yeux, les organisations non gouvernementales, les ONG, sont une solution pour la recherche d'une paix globale. Levent Billman, vous êtes l'actuel directeur de la division des politiques et médiations au département des affaires politiques des Nations Unies. Et à ce titre, au quotidien, vous êtes confronté à l'émergence de nouveaux risques et à la nécessité d'inventer des réponses d'ampleur planétaire. Alain Leroy, vous êtes ancien secrétaire général adjoint des Nations Unies, chargé du maintien de la paix, et à ce titre, vous avez œuvré sur quantité de dossiers majeurs, et votre regard sur les nouvelles formes de diplomatie globale est essentiel dans cette session plénière. Olusegun Akinsanya, vous êtes ancien ambassadeur du Nigeria et vous dirigez le think tank Institute for Securities Studies et vous avez un regard panoptique sur les problématiques du continent africain. Enfin, Marc-Hélène Bogen, vous êtes expert en sécurité internationale, membre du conseil consultatif du Parti démocrate américain. Vous avez à ce titre conseillé l'actuel président américain et vous possédez le regard de l'administration Obama. Alors peut-être pour commencer, et sans respecter l'ordre protocolaire, Monsieur le Président, vous m'en excuserez, nous pourrions commencer avec vous, l'Event Billman, où depuis l'ONU, vous possédez une vision panoptique de ces nouvelles menaces et vous concevez des manières d'y faire face. Racontez-nous ce qui vous semble aujourd'hui le plus préoccupant.
Thank you very much. First of all, a very good morning to all, and to my panelists here also. Very good morning to you all. I'm extremely happy to be in Morocco. This is the first time for me, and I would like to thank also the Amadeus Institute for organizing this important forum. I have been here since the beginning. I have listened to the panelists and the questions and comments coming from the floor very carefully, and I must say that it was extremely beneficial personally to me. You have posed the question, of course, what are the new risks and how we should be dealing with them. If you look at the United Nations Secretary General's 7 years ago, he asked a high-level panel to look into this issue. If you look at this report, you will see that most of the time we all talk about nowadays new issues, and they are not very much different from what 7 years ago this high panel presented in its report. I can list you a couple of them today, and there are of course the new ones coming up every day, and as you said, we are dealing with these issues every day in United Nations and try to come up with new strategies, try to come up with new models and innovations, how to deal with them and see that these risks do not pose any threats to overall global peace and security. I can give you a couple of them. Of course, you have heard even in this panel the armed conflict itself. You have heard terrorism, the organized crime, extreme poverty and its effect on peace and security, intolerance all over the world towards each other, towards the other, as they say, environmental degradation, the climate change and its impact on especially the food security, spread of new diseases all over the world, risk of proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, and maybe a horrible risk of terrorists getting their hands on one of these weapons. Of course, in a sense, underdevelopment, infrastructural difficulties all over the world. And I should also mention the cyber crimes, piracy more recently. You hear, especially off the coast of Africa, very often the impact of peace and security all over the world is quite big. Now, some of these, I'm sure you know that they're not very new. The world is trying to organize itself, the international community, to respond to these threats properly. But what is new today, in my opinion, is that these threats have become increasingly transnational. This is one element. Today, wherever you go, you hear the word that these threats are going beyond borders, affecting more countries, more regions, and at the global stage, of course, more countries. And they are also increasingly acute. Sometimes you cannot get rid of them. It is quite difficult to deal with them. And of course, a third element, perhaps, what is new, and they have greater implications on peace and security. Now, when you have one or two threats together, their combined effect, combined stress on the countries are huge. They have become bigger in terms of their impact. There is one more element, what is new, if you ask me, and that is the interaction between threats themselves. There is convergence among some of these threats. You see more and more organized crime gangs going into the territory of terrorism. They're combining the forces. What does it mean being transnational? I will give you one example from the past, and that is not maybe a very big example, but you remember SARS, the respiratory disease. It started somewhere in an isolated region in China, and in weeks, not only it had an effect of taking lives, more than 1,000, but also it impacted economies, it impacted tourism, it changed the lives of people all over the world suddenly. But more recently, we talk about, for example, the impact of cocaine trade, trafficking from Latin America, not only to Caribbean, a proximity neighborhood, but going into West Africa, Sahel, and from Africa to Europe. What about food security? What do I mean by transnational? Do you remember in 2010, when the Russian Federation temporarily, out of just making some calculations for its own population, of course, that put a temporary ban on export of wheat. In 2 weeks, there were demonstrations in Mozambique, a big wheat importer from Russian Federation, because the price of bread went drastically up. And that already had a huge impact on the government there. And it was a very fragile situation already. I think also what I talk about, when I talk about that these threats are being interconnected, I mentioned the organized crime going more into the territory of terrorist groups. Yesterday, from a panel, we heard that the organized crime is no longer petty crime. They're not really stealing a couple of TVs or doing this and that in order to make money illegally. But the organized crime, if you look at the 2011, this year's World Development Report, you will see that organized crime becoming an ever greater driver. It's a driver for instability, insecurity, and conflict. They are using, the organized crime right now, using corruption methods and violence to hollow out the weak states, already weak states. We have heard yesterday from the panelists the fragile states and how they are trying to cope with these new threats. But the organized crime focusing on these states now. They're hollowing out the political sphere. They're creating a political sphere for themselves. And in order to continue with their crime, they will not hesitate to go into terrorism. They will not hesitate to go to perhaps coup d'etats, create environments so that some of the politicians are working for them even. I think another area, another example I can give you is about poverty. Again, if you look at the World Bank estimates, millions of people in developing world especially were thrown into extreme poverty as a consequence of what happened globally. I haven't mentioned global economic financial meltdown. And that is creating a huge impact on peace and security. I think I should also mention that these threats require multi-layered and multidisciplinary responses. Take, for example, drug trafficking. talked about it a lot this morning. But in order to deal with the drug trafficking, you have to combine the law enforcement mechanisms with the efforts in the area of state building, in the area of rule of law, in the area of public health, in the area of human rights, and in the area of development. So you need a multi-pronged approach to deal with these problems. So very few remarks on what are we doing in the United Nations. First, Secretary General himself is extremely keen on dealing with these threats. He wants to increase the capacity of the United Nations. He wants to increase the capacities of the member states, help them out. He wants to increase the capacities of the regional organizations. He's very much proactive, and he would like to do more on this. Only a week ago, 2 weeks ago, he had a new meeting on dealing with counterterrorism in order to converge the ideas towards countering this threat and coming up perhaps a broader look towards terrorism. This year he established a high-level task force on dealing with organized crime and drugs. And he is also putting emphasis on preventive diplomacy. He's extremely proactive in that area. You know that this year he has issued his report on preventive diplomacy. He outlines his vision, but also he outlines what the UN is doing. How do we do this? Mainly, it is being close to the regions where these threats are, being proactive, being fast, and being better. So what we are doing, we are training our staff to deal with these issues constantly. We have come up with this idea of having regional offices. Now we have 3 offices in the world, regional offices. One is in Central Asia, the other one is, in Africa, in Dakar, in UNOWA. And recently we opened another one in Libreville to deal with the issues in Central Africa. Of course, the main idea is to work with the member states closely, to work with the regional organizations closely, and to be there as early as possible. I think another area is capacity building. You probably know, but the UN and for example, African Union has a 10-year capacity building program. We are trying to work together not only in the field, but we complement each other. And this is one idea that we should probably focus more on. Of course, there are challenges, and I will end with the challenges. These threats are quite fast, and they're sometimes more organized than member states. So you have to be proactive, not only proactive, but you have to be fast. And in the UN, sometimes things take a little longer. Member states take decisions a little slower than we wish them to take decisions. And if I may end trying to answer the questions put by the organizers here in this forum. For this debate, they put the question, should we, if there is a need, should we develop and agree on a new strategy worldwide to encounter these threats? My answer is yes. We are trying to do that. And the second question they posed is that should we combine this strategy with the existing institutions of the world? My answer is again yes, a very affirmative yes. We have to combine the strategy with the institutions. And what are these institutions? Of course, first and foremost, the United Nations, but the regional organizations, NGOs, civil society, member states, individuals, the man on the street. We have to make them understand that this is the strategy and everybody should work against these threats. And the question, the final question posed by the organizers in the title of this panel was that, are we going towards a new worldwide disorder? When you look at all these armed conflict, terrorism, organized crime, climate change, cyber issues, piracy. Are we going into a new worldwide disorder? But then my answer is no. We are not going towards a new disorder. Actually, we are going towards a new order. When you are moving, the word global scene is in transition today, and when you are going towards a new setup, new order, it sometimes looks like a havoc. It sometimes looks like you're in a chaos. And I think, in my opinion, this is normal. But the countries, the member states, the internationally, when you talk about stakeholders, individual on the street, NGOs, they are all trying to come up with ideas to find a new order in the world to deal with this. So we are not going towards a new disorder, we are going towards a new order. And in that path, of course, we encounter with difficulties. But my message today, if I can, is that we have to, all of us, we have to work together to get that order. We shouldn't let those terrorists, those gangs in organized crime, those people who cause havoc in the life of the normal human being in life, we shouldn't let them shape the world. It should be us. It should be the international organizations. It should be member states, civil society, the people like you are. Thank you.